Let's get started. I love this first question. Dr. Granpeesheh, my child loves video games, and I'm convinced that it isn't all bad for him. I do think it needs to be measured, though. He is 11 and high functioning. How much time should I allow him to play video games daily? Oh, this is a huge question, right?
And I love this question
okay, good.
because of where I am right now in my own work.
Okay.
So first of all, yes, you're absolutely right. Not all video games are bad. I think the fastest answer to this is like anything else. You know, forget the diagnosis, and this is your child. Families have different I guess, rules about how much time they allow their kids to be on the computer or watching TV or anything else. And the same holds true for our kids. If you feel that your child is using his computer, let's say, too much, it's excessive, then limit it to what you feel is an appropriate period of time for him to be on the computer. Or anything else, TV and so on, and just make sure that the time that he is on the computer or on a video game is not, it doesn't become sort of an obsessive type of behavior. In other words, when he's interacting with the game, you can, just like you would with any other child, say, okay, in about 5 minutes you're going to be done because we have to go somewhere, or something like that. It's as long as it doesn't become obsessive and rigid and you know, takes over his entire life, then I think it's absolutely fine. And generally, I guess with my own son, I'll allow, let's say, 2 hours max per day. Okay. But really, it depends on what your family structure is and how you would typically do that with any other child, with your typically developing kids. Our kids do have the tendency to become a little bit too engaged in anything that they like, not just video games or computer. But having said that, there's this whole other side of science that's coming into the field, and I'm so excited because I'm connecting with some people and in Boston who are building games, and also at the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF. And this whole thing is called therapeutic gaming, and I'm very, very excited about this because we feel that, of course, like anything else, I mean, you know, our kids, of course, are actually more focused when they're on the computer, right? I mean, than with people, let's say. And with anything else, you can use technology to teach. And we're just beginning to develop a series of games, and we hope to be able to, at the same time, conduct the research that goes with these games to show that certain types of gaming will not only teach skills, but will also teach certain things like increased attention, being able to avoid distractions, you know, inhibition, all sorts of different executive functioning skills that we're very interested in increasing in our kids. Overall, you know, with the situation that exists right now, of course, we have insurance funding, but even now, just, you know, we haven't even had insurance funding in California, let's say, for, it's not even a year yet. And a lot of the funding sources are beginning to realize, whoa, these programs are expensive, long-term, pretty intensive. And a lot of reasons are coming up where our funding sources are trying to reduce funding already. And of course, that's, even though we're very blessed in California, as you know, Shannon, and we have the regional center system, which is Department of Developmental Services essentially, and funding, and then we have school district funding, and now we have insurance funding, and many other states have different sources of funding. Nevertheless, if we can try to use some therapeutic gaming to help increase our kids' skills without needing an individual present all the time, then those skills that they learn can be generalized. In other words, when you have therapists, the therapist can be working with generalizing those skills to other environments, other people, and so on, but the core content of the skill, and certain activities the child can learn on the computer.
It's so smart. I have to say, it seems like a win-win. It's
so
time well
excited.
spent.
Yeah.
And as I was reading it, I was thinking, boy, for me as a parent, it kind of depends on what kinds of games, because there are educational games that he plays, and then there are ones. But I have a follow-up for you on this question now that we're talking about this, because my kid is really into the video games.
Sure.
And you mentioned, you know, it's really, you have to be careful about not letting them get to a place where they're obsessive about it. So my question is, what do you do when you've already gotten to that point, when you see that the child is obsessed and you go, okay, I blew it, and now I got to backtrack some way? How can you do that in a way that's not completely disruptive and not having a lot of challenging behavior?
Sure.
Because I feel like he's a little bit, you know, I've said to him, you're a little bit of an addict, and when you try to take it away is when, and when I try to limit it, I have to be sneaky about it sometimes, and I don't think I'm getting it done right. So what would you recommend?
And I think part of what we don't realize with our kids is it's not just that we're taking away a preferred item, obviously, which is an aversive process if you take something preferred away, but it's also the lack of control they have over when it happens.
Yeah.
So I think it helps our kids if they have a schedule. Okay. So in other words, just like school. You know, our kids go to school, they know they have from this time to this time their least favorite course, a class, but then from the next hour, a favorite class, or whatever it is. And just like anything else, it helps us get through life. So if you can do a schedule that shows this is the time frame that you get to be on the computer in the morning, and this is the time frame in the afternoon, or you have a different schedule on the weekends perhaps, then it becomes much more not your fault, but the schedule's fault, that this is just my time frame. This is when I'm supposed to be doing this, and it's perfectly fine. And you can use any source of thing. You can have a watch go off, you can have a timer present, you can have whatever to let him get into the process of understanding that this time frame is what it is. Yeah. Now, if he's, let's say right now at 4 hours a day, and you want to reduce this to 2 hours, then start with the 4-hour timer, and the next time you set it for 3 hours and 45 minutes, then set it for 3 hours and 30 minutes, then 3:15. You know, just reduce it gradually.
So don't cold turkey him.
Exactly. And very important is when he's not on the computer, he can't just be free.
Right.
You have to replace it with something, you know, closely engaging and at close to the same levels. So if he's not on the computer, then that means you're going to be doing an activity with him, perhaps taking him out, perhaps having him do some other type of chore in the house, or something that occupies him. Right. And, you know, during the time that, this is the last point on this, but during the time that he's over-engaged, this is a really good opportunity to teach him some behaviors during that phase. So for instance, he's really into his computer and you call his name and he doesn't respond. So that's a task you need to refresh. It's like, you know, the whole cognitive set shifting thing, which is you're so focused on this, but if I call you, you need to stop for a moment, look at me, answer, do everything that you're supposed to do, and then you can go back to it. There you have a great opportunity to teach set shifting. Or if you want to teach dual attention, like while he's doing that, then, you know, just be talking to him in the background or from the other room and see if he can comprehend what's going on there and back and forth. There's a lot of different types of skills that you can work on when he's engaged in something, so that it teaches him, you know, flexibility and actually increased speed with moving his attention to other things and back as well. And you said this is called set shifting? Set shifting, yeah. It's when you are involved with one activity and then you can move to another one and back fast, rapidly. I mean, we do that all the time, right? And a lot of our kids have problems with switching from one thing to another. And if you can teach them these types of things, I mean, actually, if you look in our skills program under the section, executive functioning section, under the attention programs, there's a million different things about attention, like being able to pay attention to a background stimulus when you're involved with something, or being able to switch attention, or being able to have, you know, some form of dual attention. So you're paying attention to your paper or your computer, but also the teacher. There's a lot of different aspects of attention that are important, and so a lot of when someone's engaged in something, those are the opportunities to teach those skills. But overall, again, The way I think about it is with kids on the spectrum, what you're trying to do, I guess, more than anything else, and it really depends. This family had written about a child who's pretty high functioning, I think they said. And if you are very high functioning, then you really, the biggest goal would be teaching you social skills, right? And, you know, being on a computer is the exact opposite of social skills. So in that case,
as much as we confuse it in life now with Facebook and all the other social, you know, networking stuff, it is the opposite of social.
It is. It's extremely isolating.
Yeah.
And, you know, there have been a lot of studies on how true friendships have decreased because multiple friendships on a social media basis have increased. So you have more friends, but not real friendships.
Interesting.
Because you use social media. We use social media so much. But, you know, for a more, let's say, a child who has more symptoms, not enough language, not enough content yet, skills, then I think it's allowable to have a little bit more time on the computer because they can learn content skills on the computer, whereas social skills are a little bit harder to learn using a computer. Now, also, I do remember with some of my kids when they were almost finished, the computer was an object that would actually increase their social skills if there was a child there. So they would have their buddy come over, and that is a whole different thing. Like playing with your friend interactively on video games. That's not a bad entrance to social skills, actually, because that is a very typical thing for a certain age of boys. So, you know, and nowadays, oh my gosh, the stuff that's out there. I mean, you talk about video games that most of this Xbox and so on are using Kinect. So it reads your body language and all that. I mean, the dance programs, the imitation types of programs, they're awesome because they really teach our child to imitate not only the screen but his buddy or friend who's competing against him. So you have to consider all of those things. You know, if you have someone who is trying to spend 8 hours a day on, let's say, a program that's non-interactive on their own, that's not good. That's a whole different story,
Now, you mentioned this whole thing about attention that's available in skills, and it made me think of the fact that there are a lot of the things that you listed are not my strong suit. Do you see a lot of times that you have kids that have an issue with attention, and then you notice the parents also struggle with some of that?
Absolutely. But I mean, it's very hard to compare parents to kids because aging reduces a lot of those things as well.
Is that is that the excuse I could use?
I mean, you just have too many. When you have many things that you have to pay attention to, your attention level goes down. Your memory, of course, is impacted by age. But I find that just parents as a whole, being able, like how we learn to pay attention to 5 different things at the same time. I think it's a very adaptive skill in some ways. Like when your child is very young, really you're not just paying attention to the child, you're paying attention to the child, the safety of the environment, your own needs, perhaps your, you know, your spouse, your other children. It's just, you learn to expand your attention, and the more you're paying attention to multiple stimuli, obviously you're less able to focus on one thing.
I don't think the shifting attention, I don't think I was ever good at. And I always say, once I became a parent, I can't walk and talk and chew gum at the same time anymore, because I always say I have GEM 101 running in the background. And it takes up a lot of disk space.
Absolutely. My kids make fun of me because I have, you know, all 3 of them are occasionally, not occasionally, almost all the time, talking to me at the same time, you know, and same, of course, here at college.
I was going to say, like, it's a lot.
That's my life. It's like someone's on the phone, someone's on my computer, IMing me, someone's in my office, and it's all happening at the same time.
But I see you're very good at that.
Not really. That's why my kids make fun of me, because I'm like trying to pay attention, and sometimes I just be like, okay, everybody stop, one by one. Like I can't process it.
Well, that helps me to know that you have to do that, because you appear to be very good at that. So.
Not really.
It's a world of multitasking. Okay, great answer to that videotape question. Next question, what do you do with a teenager who seems to have an endless amount of anger? He doesn't want to do what we ask him to do, and they wrote, so frustrated and scared.
Okay. Really good question. So you have to, these are, you know, that's why I said to you at one point, I love my teenagers, because it's easier to step into their shoes and see how they're processing the world, for me at least. So
Well, thank goodness that you can, because a lot of us are confused at that point.
I honestly, Shannon, is like, it's exactly what we go through.
Okay.
So just think of yourself. Why do you get angry? What are the things that make you angry? They are things that you can't change,
right?
And they cause you frustration. So this always goes back to my basic lecture on ABA, which is, if you want to analyze behavior and you want to think about why we do anything, it's always if we want to get something good or avoid something bad.
Okay.
That's the bottom line, no matter what it is. And if you want to get something good, you know, in ABA we'll refer to that as attention seeking or tangible function. That means you're trying to get an object or you're trying to get someone's attention. If you're trying to avoid something bad, that's like escape behavior or avoidance behavior. You want to get out of the classroom. You don't want to do all the work they're telling you to do and all that. If you have no control over those factors, you'll be frustrated.
Yeah.
When you are, which means you don't know what you need to do to get the things you want at a certain level, and you don't know what you need to do to avoid the things you don't want at a certain level. So frustration, what happens with frustration, some of our kids internalize frustration, it becomes depression. Some of our kids externalize frustration, it becomes aggression. So aggression is just frustration. That's all it is. So the first thing it tells me is, in this adolescent's life, in this teenage, I think, did they say teenager? Or,
they said teenager.
There's some frustration, which means that there's too many demands and not enough reinforcers. That's essentially how to
okay.
define
Too
it.
many demands, not enough reinforcers.
Not enough positives, too many negatives, from his perspective.
Okay.
So it might be a very normal schedule. You have to get up in the morning, go to school, do this, that, and the other thing. But it's harder for him. So it's more of an aversive for him to do the things that are being asked of him right now. And when he does them, he doesn't feel rewarded enough. So what he's doing is, he's in his aggression, he's saying, this just isn't fair. This is just not okay. So you have to figure out, and this is very hard sometimes for us as parents, but you have to figure out and, you know, just step back from it, list all the things that you know 100% are positives for him, are rewards and reinforcers. Not things you think, but things you know he likes. And you could even ask him, depending on his functioning level, or give him choices, pictures, and so on. So you can identify what are his reinforcers, and then list all the demands that are being made of him on a daily basis. Anything from getting up in the morning could be hugely aversive for him. I don't know his biochemistry. I don't know how he's sleeping. I don't know anything about what's causing him stress. So, and the demands are so many during the course of the day that we don't even think about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like getting up, getting dressed, having breakfast. He might not like any of those. Going to
taking
school,
a shower.
Taking a shower. Some kids hate that. Various foods they eat might be causing them discomfort. They can't express it. Going to school, being embarrassed in front of other kids, not knowing how to join other friends or find friends, or all of that might be additional pressure. Wherever those pressures and demands exist, you need to figure out a way to make them easier. Whether you, one of the lectures I give sometimes is on like the topic of when kids have IV infusions or injections or something unpleasant, like you go to the dentist, have your teeth pulled, whatever it is. That day, if it was you, you'd take it easier on yourself. If you're, let's say, on a diet, you won't diet when you're feeling like bad, you know, really terrible. So you do it for yourself. We just have to realize that for our kids, certain demands that we place on them are harder for them, and you have to reduce those demands. You have to model more, prompt more, so give more support. Just know that something in his life is too hard. You have to bring the balance. And the balance of making our kids happy is always the demands and the reinforcers have to be even. And that's not just our kids, that's us, that's everyone, right? You wake up in the morning, if you feel terrible that day, but you have something really cool and exciting or something you want happening later in the day.
Yeah.
Like you wake up and you have a cold and you think, well, that's okay, I'm going to a spa today. Everything's fine again. You wake up and you're feeling sick and you're like, oh my God, I gotta go on a construction site for 12 hours today. Too much demand. But hey, tomorrow I'll get to rest. Everything's fine again.
Okay.
The reinforcers always have to balance the demands, and when they don't, people become aggressive or depressed or anxious or whatever.
What a great way of looking at things for our kids and for us as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very simple.
Very
We get
empowering.
lost in it though, because we think if he's aggressing, he's behaving bad, and I need to somehow punish him, and that is just not the truth. We all aggress, and that doesn't mean that we're behaving bad. That means we've gone over our limits.
Okay.
It's not like our kids intentionally want to be mean. No, they don't. That's the only way he knows to balance his environment. So when does he get aggressive? Because that's probably around the time something is happening that's just too high demand.
Okay. Really fascinating.
Yeah.
And should we assume that all of this is unconscious for the child and not get into having a discussion with them and trying to ask them to identify what it is?
You know,
because they may not know,
oh my
right?
gosh, no way will they be able to know. We don't know. I mean, a lot of times what we do is we just assume various things, you know, like it could be a hundred different reasons, but it is most of the time unconscious, or like the child is not aware, because what's happening is, this is how the process goes. I want something, I can't get it, I aggress, and then I get it.
Right.
And so I learn, oh, aggression is not all that bad.
Right.
You know, it is the tool that helps me get my reinforcers, so I balance out a little bit. And think about that again, it's not just about our kids, it's about anyone, right? Why do certain employers just yell at everyone? Why? Because in the past, when they've yelled at people, the work they wanted has gotten done. So they've been successful, so they've learned this is a way to deal with it. Or maybe not. Maybe they've been successful as a child, and whenever they yelled, parents would stop bothering them. Whatever it is. We learn these behaviors, and it's not like we're aware of what we're doing. Certainly not our kids.
Right.
Now, having said that, our kids also model from each other.
Yeah.
So a child could potentially see another child in school aggress and get taken out of the classroom, and from our child's perspective, it'll be like, that's not bad. I'd like to get out of the classroom. Maybe that's what I should do. That kind of seemed to work. Or aggress, a child might aggress in a classroom and get a lot of attention, teacher, everyone, and our child will misunderstand that this wasn't really good attention, but nevertheless, it's attention, I'll go for it.
Right.
And they'll learn. And it's, you know, aggressing and just like pushing people away and so on is almost also a protective, innate behavior that we have. It's like if something harms you, you push it away or you try to get rid of it. So it's a very natural reaction for someone to get aggressive. The only reason we don't is because we've learned social norms. I mean, otherwise everybody would. Cavemen did, you know? So it's once social rules developed of, hey, you can't hate people, you know, then a lot of people learn. Some people didn't learn, and they still do, right? Which is why we have abuse situations and so on. So it certainly is not something the child is aware of.
Okay.
Always remember, any challenging behavior is just communication. The individual is trying to say something they can't otherwise, or they don't know how to otherwise.
I love this because it's very empowering, because you take the fear out of it. It starts to make sense.
Oh, totally, totally.
And that's a very empowering thing. That's wonderful. I think we should take a break, and we're going to come back. Keep your questions coming in, and we'll be back more with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh after these messages. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, a true visionary in the field of autism. And I know last week I had said something about the fact that you had over 2 decades, and you corrected me and said over 3 decades of experience working with children on the autism spectrum, which is, you know, you only have to speak to you to hear it, but you certainly don't look it.
Thank you.
So, in any case, we were talking during the last segment about a viewer had written in about a teenager who had a lot of anger, and there was something that you wanted to add to it when we went to break.
Right. I don't want people to get the impression that when an individual as a child or an adolescent has a lot of anger and aggressive behaviors, that all you do is reduce their demands and so on. You fix the situation by reducing the demands and increasing the rewards, but at the same time, the individual, the child or adolescent, has to get the concept that this isn't a functional form of communicating with people. This is not okay, right? And so it's very important to not give in to whatever it is that the person is seeking out by aggressing. So if the person aggresses because they want to get out of a classroom, it's very important to not let them get out. If the person aggresses because they try to get an object or because they don't want to stop doing an activity, it's important to make sure they don't get the object or they continue the activity. So you do the opposite of what they're trying to achieve, and instead what you do is you redirect, you get other types of activities that will bring in the reinforcers. You don't want to be reinforcing the aggressive behavior.
Right.
And that
but
has to be very
attention
clear.
is one of the hardest ones. If they're seeking attention and they're aggressing, that's one of the hardest ones, because you certainly don't want to ignore the behavior, but you don't want to ignore the child, but you do want to not reinforce the behavior.
The behavior, yeah. And that's again why, the field of ABA has developed so much and has given us so many different, really very clear rules about how you identify the function of a behavior. When I first started, all the functional analysis stuff wasn't really in place back then, and it was very hard to do or to train people to do functional analysis. Now you do a functional assessment of something, it's very easy. You just identify what the reason is, and yes, in some cases you will be ignoring the whole child. In some cases you'll be just ignoring the behavior. In some cases and that's a very important thing. When we say ignoring the behavior, like when I teach about extinction, which is sort of ignoring the behavior, I really go into 100 examples, because you don't even talk about it.
Right.
So it's like you don't say to the child, I'm going to ignore you now because you're doing something bad, because by doing that, you're not ignoring.
And it sounds ridiculous, but I have in fact done that.
Oh, of course, we all do that. We all do that. I mean, I'm
ignoring that behavior.
I still sometimes say to my little one something like, I'm just not interacting with you anymore. And you know what? I just interacted. And the truth is, all you have to do is just walk away.
Yeah.
The scenarios where you don't walk away is just safety issues.
Yes.
To the child themselves or to others. And I swear to you, a lot of times parents say to me that my child is, let's say, becomes so aggressive that they will injure themselves. For instance, hit their head on the wall or desk or something. And I will tell them to put a video monitor in the room and watch the child from outside. 99% of the time, we don't do aggressive acts to ourselves or property destruction or anything like that unless there's someone else present.
Yeah.
Because that tells you right away it's attention seeking.
Yeah. Amazing. And then we also wanted to note that we talked about during the break that if you're having a child who's having a great deal of anger issues.
Yeah, and an adolescent, and it's getting scary, get professional help. And this is, I talk about this because this is my language, this is how I've lived most of my life. It isn't easy.
Right.
And when you are dealing with an adolescent who's probably bigger than you, stronger than you, you should get professional help. You really should. We have a program here at CAR. It's called SOS, Specialized Outpatient Services, and that program is short-term, going and dealing or bringing in our kids and dealing with just severe challenging behavior and training the parents how to deal with severe challenging behavior, and it works.
And I think a lot of times people assume that that's just for the younger kids, and it really isn't. It goes the gamut.
Well, it definitely goes the gamut, because the younger kids are so much easier, and when you become become just larger and stronger, and you still don't have functional communication skills. Aggression develops at all different ages.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So good thing to note. And if you're interested in finding out more about the SOS services, you can go to centerforautism.com, or you can call the 800 number and they'll connect you with that. I know we were clients of SOS at one point when
Right.
Jem was hitting me in the head.
Right.
And I got to the point where I said, help, we need help. And they came in and turned that around very quickly for us.
And if you, I don't know if you still are having Jonathan on the show.
Yes,
He's a regular.
on Fridays,
You should talk to him more. You should have him talk more about challenging behavior.
I will.
I've heard him lecture on the subject, and he's spectacular.
Yes, he really is incredible. And I will make sure that we do that. He's away this week because he's at ABAI, the Autism Conference, speaking.
That's right. That's right. Now.
But I'm jealous. I would also like to be there. But he'll come back and tell us all kinds of things about that. And I've asked for those of you who are viewers, if you're attending, to let us know different things, talks that you went to and what you thought of them. But I digress. Our next question, and you've talked about this a little bit before, but they want to know, what do you think of all the different autism diets, the low oxalate, Paleo, SCD, Feingold, GFCF? There are a wide variety of diets that are out there. It can be very confusing. We're going to be doing some more shows about that, but what is your opinion?
And yes, there are a lot of diets out there, and it is very confusing. My opinion about that is that, and this is sad to say, but the truth is that many of the ones you listed there, I have seen have different types of interactions with kids. So it's like certain medications, for instance, that will have a positive effect on one child and not on another child, and the diets are the same. A lot of the when we first started tracking dietary stuff, the GFCF, and then later, of course, soy and corn free as well. But that diet was spectacular, and it was showing a lot of different types of effects on a lot of our kids. There are other kids who have other issues, like a lot of yeast issues. Those will impact what type of diet. Kids with seizure will have a certain type of diet. If you're looking at some of the kids with the specific carb diet, do extremely well. Others do absolutely horribly. The low oxalate diet has had a lot of impact on some of my kids. I've seen that. It just really varies. In that realm, in the dietary, I really, truly suggest you work with a very experienced nutritionist. There are some, Julie Matthews, for instance, is a very, very good nutritionist. There are some really good nutritionists in the field, and or also with a physician who is familiar with these diets and can help you really understand which is which and how it works. The low oxalates, Susan Owens, who is part of the ARI group, basically, is a mom who is extremely knowledgeable about the low oxalate, more than anyone else I know. Of course, on the SCD diet, there's a lot of books. Feingold, all of these other diets have been published, and there's a lot of material on them. And there are some lab tests that help you establish which one you should go to, but even the lab tests are not 100% accurate. So really, it's a matter of working with a nutritionist where you can eliminate certain foods and measure the outcome, measure the behavior change. The most common question parents ask me is, we went off, let's say, gluten, and we really didn't see anything. I'm like, okay, as long as you were off of it for about 3 months and you didn't see anything, as long as you were 100% off it for about 3 months and didn't see anything, fine. Because, and I also want to say that one of the best tests for these things is a challenge test. So you're off gluten for 3 months, introduce the child to some gluten and see if you see a change in behavior. You're off casein for 3 months, or even casein is even faster, a month, you'll see reaction changes. But, the other part of this, which for me is a little bit more, I guess, I can generalize more. So with that response, I can't really generalize, because each of those diets I've heard have different types of effects, and there are studies showing that as well. Now, as a whole, generally, the general diet that our kids are exposed to is not very good in the U.S., and as a whole, even worse than that, the food we have is not that good. So I really do actually recommend that parents work with nutritionists as much as possible. We are actually looking to hire a nutritionist here at CARD because it does have a pretty big impact on our kids. And being able to have, you know, organic or really farmed foods, that in itself makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And just a programming note, you mentioned Julie Matthews from Nourishing Hope. She's going to be here on the show on February 11th.
That's terrific.
So if you're interested in watching that, you can tune in for that.
Is she coming in, or?
We're going to Skype with her.
Oh, that's terrific.
We're going to Skype with her.
Okay.
But I'm excited to have her on the show. Okay, our next question from a viewer. My child was making great progress and now seems to have stagnated. She hasn't mastered anything in at least 6 weeks. My ABA provider doesn't think there is anything to worry about. I would love to know your opinion. Shouldn't we be changing something?
Oh, I wish I knew the age of the child and what programs. Okay, I don't know the age. That doesn't help at all. But 6 weeks is too long of a period for no progress if you're doing basic core lessons. Okay. 6 weeks is a very short period of having no progress if you're doing advanced lessons.
Okay.
So if you're doing something like, you know, touch, colors, letters, objects, labels, actions, whatever, something that's core prepositions, you know, easy stuff that you should generally, that usually has it's not abstract. It's very concrete and you have stimuli and so on. Then 6 weeks it's not even all that long, but it is long. You should have some progress daily.
Okay.
But if you're doing advanced programs like teaching the child how to tell jokes, how to see other people's perspectives, 6 weeks is nothing.
Okay.
That's a very typical time frame for the child to just start to learn something basic, something that advanced. So that has a lot to do with it. But if it's a young child and it's basic programming, then yeah.
Okay.
And let me say another thing. I don't know the intensity.
Right.
So one of the biggest things that happens is parents will say to me, I mean, right now I just took over a family on the East Coast, which is an important family to me, and they were sort of disappointed that they weren't seeing a lot of progress. And I went in to kind of look at their programming, and I realized, oh my gosh, they're only doing 4 hours a week of programming. And they're in school, the child is in school and has special ed at school, but you know, at that level I would not really include special ed at school as part of their ABA program. And really and the child also has speech and also has OT, like 1 hour of each a week. But 4 hours of ABA, I wouldn't expect to see anything. Okay. And that's the core problem, I think, Shannon, that people don't understand, is that you do really only have a certain period of time. You don't want these ABA programs to go on for the child's life.
Right.
So that's why you intensify, because at 4 hours of ABA a week, I'm coming nowhere close to teaching this child the skills they need. I'm not even teaching a tenth of the skills they need. So you really need to intensify, and so that's a core reason too. So ask yourself if you're doing enough to make change. And the example I always give is, if a physician gives you a drug and says you have to take 25 milligrams of this, and you take 2 milligrams, you're not going to see a change. In fact, what's going to happen is the individual will become resistant to that drug. And it's the same with ABA. You do 4 hours, it doesn't really have a big enough impact, and your child's going to get frustrated because, why am I doing 4 hours of this thing that isn't teaching me much?
Right. Right. Yeah. Somebody gave me the example the other day that when stars prepare for a movie and they want to get really defined muscularly, how the intensity of what they do with a trainer is so much more, and that when we're trying to work out at home and we're doing little shifts and doing 10 minutes of working out, we don't stick with it.
Right.
We're not going to get ripped.
Right.
And we aren't going to stay doing it.
Right.
But when you get that level of intensity is when you're going to get those amazing results. And I thought, oh, okay, that makes a certain amount of sense.
It does, absolutely.
Okay, our next question. I want to start preparing my 14-year-old to be able to hold a job, but I have no idea how to start. Are there good books on the subject, or do you have any suggestions about getting them job ready starting at 14? That seems great that they're starting that early.
It's just so amazing that we're getting so many questions today that are right where my life is right now. We're just in the process of working with, I think I've mentioned to you, Dr. Luvis Mara, who is one of the original founders of the Mind Institute,
Yes.
and an amazing, amazing man, and he also is an advisor to the Senate, to Senator Steinberg, and he is in California, in Sacramento. And with his help, we've started to develop right now a classroom which is going to be focused on just vocational training for adolescents. And we're using, it's not just vocational training, we're doing two things. We're using technology also to teach vocational skills.
Right.
And this is up in Sacramento, and I think the school name is Sierra, but I can get more information on this if the person wants. So we're just beginning to develop this. The person that is very good with vocational training and for adolescents and up is Peter Gerhardt. If you look up Peter Gerhardt, he's in New York, I believe, and but he does have a lot of stuff online that he has published on how to teach work skills and so on. And we just pulled one of our managing supervisors, actually, or we're in the process of pulling her off and having her just write and develop our vocational training curriculum. And we're videotaping all of what we're teaching right now so that we can also have some video training going on.
Right.
But yeah, there is actually a lot of material out there, and I think Peter Gerhardt's website would be a good place to start.
Okay, great. And how do you spell Gerhardt?
Gerhardt.
Okay, good. Fabulous. Great information. Okay, we're almost out of time. So, oh, this is a great question because sometimes my child cycles through this. My child asks me a question and I answer him. Then 3 minutes later, he'll ask me the same question again. I answer it again, and then a few minutes later, he'll ask the question again. And the thing is, he really doesn't remember the answer I gave him. It drives me buggy. Is there a way to make it stop?
So I don't know if, and we only have a couple of minutes, so I'll be fast. I don't know if he doesn't remember or if there could be three things here in my mind. He doesn't remember, which is easy enough to fix because you can write it in front of him or do some sort of a visual that reminds him, so he doesn't have to keep asking you. So actually, if you have a visual, you know, some sort of icon that represents the answer or some writing, if he can read, then just place that in front of him or give it to him when he asks. The second thing it could be is that he's just trying to communicate with you and he doesn't have language enough to communicate. That's a whole different story, and you basically ignore that. When the question repeats itself, you ignore the question and you interact in a different way.
Okay.
So you increase interaction. And the third thing could be that it's a very either anxiety-provoking or exciting thing that he's asking you about. And so he's trying to be sure. In other words, he's trying to make sure that it's either going to happen or not happen. And he wants reassurance. So in those cases, again, it's hard to answer this because it really has to do with the level of functioning of the child. And if the child is at a certain level of functioning and you can identify now, pay attention to it in the future. If it's an anxiety-provoking thing, I would sit down, if the child's at a higher level function, I would sit down with the child and just say, what are the things that are scaring you about this right now, and start visualizing that, like help him through the anxiety actually. Or if it's something that's extremely exciting, then I would use the opportunity that he keeps asking to sit down and, like, you know, write things about what are the exciting things about this activity, or I would engage him in some other way to discuss the exciting things. But I think the easiest answer that might help in no matter what scenario is to somehow think of a visual cue card or something that you can give to the child, let's say the second time they ask. You can have the child prepare the visual. Doesn't matter what's on there, because when they look at the card, it'll remind them of the answer.
I'm going to go home and make a card that says, dinner is cooking.
There you go.
Because
is that what he asked?
That's what my child, he says, Mom, I'm hungry. And I say, okay, dinner is, and he'll say, what's for dinner? And is dinner almost ready? And I'll say, dinner is cooking. It's going to be ready in this amount of time.
There you go. Anticipation of something exciting. He's hungry, he wants food. You know what else you could do, Shannon, is you could just simply set a timer for him.
Okay.
So you need 20 more minutes. Set it and say, when this thing goes off in 20 minutes, then dinner must be ready.
And then tape it to his face.
Well, I mean, just
I won't
put it
need
in
to
front
because
of
he'll
it.
stop asking.
Yeah, and you know what? If he moves around the house, then just draw the timer. So what he'll on a card and put it in his pocket. So what he'll do is learn to look at the timer. That'll remind him and go see how much time's left.
Yeah, because he.
Or even on a clock, tell him when this hits 7. That's when it's ready.
Yeah, because, he can ask me that 300 times.
Yeah.
And I get to the point where I go, stop asking me.
Always figure out why. And the only thing is he doesn't know how to measure time. A lot of times our kids don't know how to measure time. So when you say soon, it means nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right.